to become a therapist. What books should you read to make sure that you're on the right path? Let me help you out with that. Who am I? I'm Jessica. Just got my master's degree in therapy. I'm a pre-licensed therapist myself, and these are the books I'd recommend to anyone who asks me, what book should I read to make sure that I know therapy is the right career for me? First of all, why not start off with one of the masters, Irvin Yalom. He's a giant in our field, a highly respected clinician, and a really talented writer. His book, The Gift of Therapy, is an amazing source of inspiration for young therapists. I felt really inspired the first time I read his book before I started my graduate school program, and I'd recommend reading it, or at least flipping through it, throughout your career to come back to the basics and remember why you're doing this in the first place. He mixes a little bit of technique with a lot of warmth and storytelling, and I think it's just a great read for anyone who's starting grad school or even someone who's already a therapist but feeling a little bit lost. And I actually even think it would be a great suggestion for a new client, someone who doesn't really know what to expect out of therapy yet and they're wondering what it's like. This is a great read for that. Next up, and in a similar vein, I would check out Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. It's a memoir. This one's more about Lori's experience being a therapist and being a client in therapy, and it's just a really in-depth look at her own journey with that. I think it's really interesting to see a book that really goes deeply into that personal process of like what therapy is really like, what is going on in that room, in that relationship, what it feels like to be a therapist, to be a client in therapy. It's just there's not a lot of books written like that from that perspective, and I would really recommend checking out Lori's book. I also think it's really important to examine the reasons that you're thinking of becoming a therapist. So I would highly recommend checking out Marianne Schneider-Corey and Gerald Corey's book on becoming a helper. This is one that I read during my undergraduate program, and I found it just really, really helpful for gaining that like self-insight that you need when you're first entering this career. Asking yourself, why am I doing this? What are my motivations? And being honest with yourself. That's a really important step to this process. And the Coreys are also just so warm and empathic in their writing style. You just feel very understood and taken care of as a young therapist. They're very nurturing, and there's a lot of reminders in this book to go easy on yourself early in your career and, take it slow. Don't judge yourself, but do be open and honest with yourself. So that kind of thing, that's why I'd really recommend it to anyone thinking about becoming a helper. It's a great book for that thinking process that leads up to the actually becoming. Last up, Healer, Heal Thyself. This is an important one. Please check out The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. A lot of us in this field are wounded healers. Most people coming into therapy school are in therapy or need to be in therapy. No shame, that's just the way it is. So I'd really recommend checking out this book to kind of understand the underlying patterns that have led you here. It really goes into these common childhood patterns that can basically lead you into this career. I mean, you might be saying to yourself, or you've said to your friends before, oh, I just love listening to people. It comes so naturally to me. People love to just tell me their whole life story, and I love to hear it. Yeah, there's probably a reason that pattern shows up in your life over and over. There's probably been some shaping going on there to lead you to have that personality type. And this book is just a great way to examine that shaping, like what happened in your life that led you to always listening to people and never being the one sharing, and kind of the dynamics that happen in therapy. Miller really does write to a reader that's already kind of a therapist, but it's also for a broad audience. It's not just for therapists, but I think it's a great read for therapists, or anyone that has kind of like a difficult relationship with a parent figure. I think it's important to just examine that dynamic that might have occurred in your life before you get into the career. And it's not to dissuade you from getting into the career. Like, say you had this pattern going on in your life where a parent needed you to be their therapist as a kid, and you grew to enjoy that role, be confident in that role, and that led you to think, oh, I would be a great therapist. Miller's not trying to dissuade you from doing that. In fact, I think who else would become therapists besides people who have kind of had that experience and have those feelings of like, I'm pretty good at this, I want to do this. She's not trying to dissuade you, but she is trying to open your eyes. So I think it's important to open your eyes. Lastly, I would say you can skip Mary Piffer's book, the Letters to a Young Therapist book. um, ugh, I'm so sorry. It's just trite, boring, twee. The whole thing just kind of felt like a long side tangent to me. There wasn't really much like helpful material in there. I would say skip that one. I'm so sorry. Just trying to be honest and save you time. And then last suggestion, it's not a book, but make sure that you're in therapy yourself. I mean, do you like reading therapy books already? Do you like the work that you're doing in therapy with your therapist? And you could see yourself doing that with clients yourself. That's a really important step in the process, is making sure that you've done that. I mean, you might be surprised that there are usually in every year, every cohort, a couple of people that haven't been to therapy, and yet they're in grad school to be a therapist. And I would say you don't want to be that person in the room that when everyone's talking about my therapist said this, and you don't have anything to contribute. I think it's just important to make that investment in yourself and in your own therapy to see if you even like what's going on in the room before you make an even bigger investment in your career of like fully charging ahead with a huge change in your career and not even knowing if you like what's going on there. So that's my list. Check out those books. Maybe see if you can get them at your local library. Personally, I read all of them on my Kindle. I love Kindle. The only thing I would recommend is the Corey and Corey textbook. It's more of a textbook. It's not really like a reading book. It has a lot of lists and checklists and questions and stuff to ask yourself. But it's better to see like the whole page at once, I would say. So either try and get the textbook version, or personally I like the PDF so I can annotate, highlight, and add pages and subtract pages and whatever on my iPad. So I'd recommend checking that one out on the iPad. Yeah, follow me along on my bibliotherapy journey, my associateship journey. I'm going to be vlogging, making videos here on this channel, and I hope you'll come along.